So Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, it's the upcoming game from Xbox / Bethesda / MachineGames. And it is, of course, being executively produced by the one and only Todd Howard, which is cool. Oh, wait. Oh. It's not a Luke Stevens video without the Todd Howard cutout. Yeah, you thought you were done with him after Starfield? No. We're bringing him back. Anyway, this is the big upcoming game that's coming out early December on the 9th, officially 8th on Steam, depending on where you live. And also on the 6th, it'll be out if you pay for the digital deluxe edition for 3-day early access. But it's the next big game from Microsoft. There's been a handful of trailers. There's been a handful of previews where people have gotten to play as much as 3 hours of the game. And we're going to talk about it all here in this video as part of our Skeptical Look series. In case you're not aware, these Skeptical Look videos are basically just a chance to look at a game critically and evaluate whether or not it's worth your interest and potentially your money based on the information that's available to us at this point. Being skeptical does not mean being cynical. I want to be very clear about that. A lot of people conflate the two and get it confused. Being cynical is just finding problems and poking holes in stuff for the sake of poking holes in stuff. That's not helpful. What we're doing is we're looking skeptically at the claim that this game is worth your money, that this game is worth your excitement, and dare I say, hype. And being skeptical just means that you are not convinced of that proposition until there is sufficient evidence to support that proposition. Once there is enough, then you're justified in it. Like if you're excited for GTA 6, I think you're okay. Rockstar has like never missed, okay? It's safe to say that that's going to be very impressive as a game. Should you pre-order? Probably not. I don't think you should ever pre-order, but that's just me. But in the case of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, there has been a lot of excited hyping that's been going around with this game, and I've seen a handful of red flags in my research of this game that I'm going to describe to you as we go through this video. But we're going to talk about it, we're going to describe it, and I'm going to show you all the stuff I found, because there's a couple of like glaring problems with Indiana Jones and the Great Circle that seemingly has not bothered anybody, even though to me they seem like big red flags. So I'm going to point them out to you and you can make of them what you will. Sound good? Cool. Also, I do not have a sponsor for this video, but if you have an extra $1 laying around, consider donating it to the fundraiser on this video. I'm trying to do a little bit of good this year through my my big platform here on the YouTube channel. So if you would consider donating to the fundraiser, that would be amazing. It's for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It's a fantastic charity and cause. All of those like poster boards you see in like Walmart or Target for missing children, they put those up, they help find them. And it's a cause that's very near and dear to my heart as a new father. I believe, shocker, that every child deserves a safe and good childhood. And this is one way that we can help make that happen. So if you have an extra $1 or $2, consider donating it to the fundraiser. That would be amazing. All the proceeds are collected directly from the charity. It never touches my hands or anybody else's. It goes straight to them. So if you have an extra $1 or $2, consider donating it there, and we can do a little bit of good while talking about Indiana Jones. But with all that said, let's get into it. So the first trailer that we got has a couple of little Easter eggs and snippets. You can see that it's just a slow pan over a 24 FPS video showing Bethesda and then MachineGames and then eventually Lucasfilm, and then they're gonna show the fedora and the whip. It's like, oh, it's Indiana Jones. They're doing something. That's crazy. This was like 3-ish years ago, and that's that. One of the other interesting little Easter eggs in this is at the very beginning. If you look at it, you can see on the book Ancient Circle. Of course, it would end up being called The Great Circle, but it's written by Todd Howard, which you know, it's a good little Easter egg. I'll give him that. It's like literally dead center in the frame at the very beginning of the trailer, but it's a good little touch. Of course, the other thing is the idol right here. You might recognize from the very first Indiana Jones movie. And interesting little Easter egg. Todd is like a hardcore fan of Indiana Jones. And you might be like, Luke, how do you know that? Well, it's because there is an interview from 2008 where Todd Howard was talking about the design process of making Fallout 3. And in this video that was included on the Making of Fallout 3 DVD that came in the collector's edition for Fallout 3, you can actually see on Todd Howard's desk the same little idol all the way back in 2007 or 2008. It's not exactly clear when this was filmed because it was during the production of Fallout 3, not necessarily when it launched. But you can see, even back then, he had little memorabilia from Indiana Jones on his desk. So he's wanted to do something with the franchise for a long time. And funnily enough, Todd has a brother, Jeffrey Howard, who works for Disney. He's written a bunch of the movies like Planes, a bunch of the Tinkerbell movies he's written. You can see the familial resemblance here. And so part of me wonders if the reason we now have an Indiana Jones game is if like Todd tapped his brother and was like, hey, do you think you could get me like Mr. Iger's phone number, and like maybe I call him and we set something up? Maybe we do that. Like, it's not outside the realm of possibility that it's because of his brother that they got the contacts, or it's just a small world. Either way, it's very, very funny how small of a world this is, that Todd's wanted to do this forever and his brother works with Disney all the time. So make of that what you will. A little useless information for you. But after that, months would go by. We'd eventually get a look at some gameplay of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, where we actually got to see our first look at this version of Indy. And it was here where it was obvious that this was, of course, going to actually have Indiana Jones as the main character. Believe it or not, that was in question for a long time. People were worried that they were going to do like a spin-off where it would be like, not Indiana Jones, but John Jones. And it's just a guy that comes in and is a mixed martial artist and makes beating people up look extremely easy. And it wouldn't really have anything to do with the original Indiana Jones story, but it would be a reinvention or something. But no, they actually decided to stick with it, do something original, but with Indiana Jones as a character. And they hired Troy Baker to voice Indy. And it seems like he's done a very, very good job from everything that we've heard and from the previews that have praised it as well. But perhaps the biggest takeaway from this reveal was that the game was overwhelmingly in first person. And that came as a surprise to some because it was framed sort of as like Indiana Jones, but Uncharted, which Uncharted was always kind of like PlayStation's version of Indiana Jones. So this is just like going back to basics, I guess, but it's a first-person game that occasionally drops to third during certain actions and behaviors from the player. So like you swing with your whip, that right there, you'll be pulled into third person, or if you are like climbing a ladder or zip lining like this, then you'll go into third person. Otherwise, all the combat, gameplay, stealth, all of that is in first person. I'm not particularly perturbed by this, but I do think there is a strange look to this game that I've not been able to shake. I think it's because of the tighter FOV, because a lot of this footage seems to have been captured off of console, and that just breaks my brain as somebody that needs to play with a wide FOV in first person. Otherwise I get motion sick. And my podcast co-host Joe Raptor, we run a show called the Free Roam Podcast. He pointed something out to me that I can never unsee now, which is that he thinks that this game looks like a VR game. And now that I've heard that, I can't unsee it, because all of the cutscenes do, for whatever reason, look like a VR game. I don't know why some first-person games don't look like VR games, and this one does, but it does. If you understand what's going on in my brain to make me think that, let me know. But this sequence right here, jumping between planes while they fly through a bombarded city, those types of big set pieces are what got me excited. That's what I love about these types of action games, are those huge, crazy set pieces and blockbuster cinematic moments. And that got me really, really excited. And that excitement held for a number of weeks / months until I eventually saw the previews that came out. And here's the deal with the previews. They're pretty split. Some people absolutely love it, absolutely are eating up what they played of the 3-ish hours they got. Others have some big problems. And what's interesting is that the people that love this stuff and have eaten up what they've tried of this game, they do not mention a single element that's brought up by the negative previews, or at the very least the critical previews. And that to me is something I've noticed a handful of times with certain IP or certain studios. Notably, I felt like with Starfield, another Todd project, there were a lot of glaring issues with that game that I talked about for months before it even came out that nobody else wanted to address, and I got a lot of flack for it at the time, and then was sort of vindicated later once people got the game. But I don't say that to like pat myself on the back. I bring that up because I think that something similar is happening here, where some people, their like rose-tinted glasses go on either when Todd's involved or when it's an IP that they grew up with as a child, and they stop thinking critically about the game. Like, it's like when people were saying that Hogwarts Legacy was going to be the next 10 out of 10 masterpiece or something. And I'm like, guys, it's probably going to be fine, but like the last game from this studio was Cars 3 Driven to Win. Like, Look at this footage. Okay, Jacob put it on screen. This footage is the last game the team behind Hogwarts Legacy made before they made that game. It's wildly impressive they made Hogwarts Legacy, but it kind of explains why some areas of that game were struggling to keep up with the ambitious vision they had. So my goal with all this is to not just glaze the game by looking only at the positive and ignoring the negative until it comes time for review. I want to bring it all up, and if there is a red flag, if there is something strange, we point it out now, because at the very least, maybe, at this point it's too late, but in the future, if you bring up a red flag, it can be addressed. Notably, Avowed recently had previews go up just a handful of days ago. And during those previews, a lot of the problems people had back in the summer when they last saw the game have been addressed or have been significantly improved because people were critical in their feedback. They didn't just try to glaze it and be like, you did so good, we're so proud of you, pat on the head. That doesn't help anybody, okay? The people making these games are adults, and you can be critical and it's okay. Okay, like, we don't have to treat them like toddlers. They're adults. Anyway, that's a huge diatribe, basically to get to the point of the main discussion that I want to have here, which is around the previews that have gone up. Now, of the previews that went up, one of the more positive, if not the most positive one that I saw, came from IGN themselves. And this preview was interesting because it was done by Ryan McCaffrey, who is the executive editor of previews at IGN, one of the OGs. He's like, he's been around forever. I think he got started in games media back in like the early 2000s, like 2002, 2003. He's a veteran of the industry. This is the guy, for example, that did the 5.9 star or 5.9 out of 10 review of Alien Isolation back in 2014. So he's been around for ages, but he did this preview, and in it, he describes, the broader approach that they've taken with it, how much he likes the visual style. He talks about that a lot. I encourage you to read through the entire thing or watch the video if you are really interested. But most notably, he brings up a couple of gameplay systems, such as the stealth stuff. And he says, the Great Circle taps into something I didn't mind, Thief. I suppose the nighttime setting and classic Italian architecture contributed to that vibe, but it was more so the fact that stealth is the dominant approach here, along with the fact that there are a whole lot of doors to find keys to unlock, valuables to backtrack to later, and hidden items and information all over the place. While Indy's fists are his primary weapon in the Great Circle, I quickly learned that it's best to get something in his hands whenever possible, as sneaking up from behind with a sufficiently potent object can yield a one-hit stealth takedown. I say object, by the way, since most of what I picked up weren't proper weapons, but instead things like brooms, violins, guitars, shovels, candlesticks, a pipe wrench, a frying pan, etc. He carries on describing other elements of the stealth system, how you can pick up bodies and move them, and this is what I've noticed about a lot of previews recently, especially from like big outlets, is that they are very descriptive, okay? Like, they're not evaluating what they're describing. They will just describe to you what they saw, and that's it. And maybe that is exactly what you want out of a preview. You don't want any commentary, any editorialization, any feedback, or anything like that. Maybe that is exactly what this should be. But I just want to point out that even though they do not bring up any problems with what they saw, which I'll show you in just a second, does not mean that those things are not there. Like, for example, at launch for Cyberpunk 2077, I could describe the amazing art style, I could describe the really impressive narrative, I could describe the world building, all that stuff that were strengths of the base game. But I just don't mention a big problem, like the horrible optimization, the bugs, the glitches, all of that. I didn't say it performed perfectly, but the person writing that preview in that instance would have been describing accurately what they saw with regard to those individual topics, but that does not mean that there aren't problems elsewhere that they are just choosing to not discuss, or that they were unaware of or didn't catch. In other words, it's really important to understand when somebody is just trying to describe something to you versus trying to critically evaluate it. And I think some people mistake pure descriptions as positive feedback towards something because they didn't mention anything problematic or that could be bad or in need of fixes. And I think this is just something I've noticed about IGN's new approach to previews, is that they try very hard to not give any critical feedback in the previews unless it's so bad that they can't help it. Like with something like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League's previews, which pretty much everybody was like, it's really bad, because there was no defending it. Like, you had to bring up the major problems with that if you tried it at the previews. Like there was just no getting around it. Whereas with something like this, maybe it's more up to your individual play style, so you can kind of speed past some key issues such as the AI, which IGN does not mention, but other outlets did, and it seems like this is going to be probably the thing that makes or breaks this game. In all the gameplay footage that we've seen so far, it seems once again that this is much more of a stealth game than it is an action adventure game, or as Ryan said in his preview, it's more of an adventure action game than an action adventure game, which I think basically just means don't expect a lot of big action sequences. They might be there occasionally, but most of the game is going to be spent stealthing through corridors, crouching around boxes, throwing an object to distract a guard while you sneak around them, picking up pieces of paper and reading it, and that's going to be probably 70% of the runtime. And this is why it's going to be so crucial to have solid AI, because when so much of your game's runtime is going to be spent hunting down enemies or trying to distract them and stealth your way around them or through them, it's crucial that they behave in an intelligent and interesting way that keeps that compelling. A recent game that really failed at this was Star Wars Outlaws. That game had a lot of things going for it, not just a huge budget, but it also had the Star Wars IP, and it had a very capable team, the team behind the Division games, and it struggled primarily, in my opinion, because the AI was so lackluster that you could walk up to a guard, like right here, like literally Todd is right here and I'm right here. K-Vest comes, hits me upside the head with a fist just to knock me out. I fall on the ground right here and Todd would just and turn and nothing would happen. It was bizarre and it tore you out of any sense of immersion you had. It made the game painfully easy because you could just walk straight up to somebody, or you know, their field of view was maybe 30 degrees, so you just walk right next to them, even in their field of view, what should be their field of view, and knock them out, and it's fine. And that's why, like, good AI, good enemy detection, all of that is crucial to a game that involves a lot of stealth. And while IGN didn't mention it, other outlets, I'm going to show you two, did, and it seems like it's not great. PC Gamer mentioned that after 3 hours with Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, I don't think it's the grand adventure MachineGames is pitching, it's just a fairly basic stealth game. And this is kind of what it seems like to me in all the footage I'm seeing. Other than that really cool plane sequence, which we saw in that first gameplay trailer reveal, it seems like most of what you're actually going to be doing with the controller moment to moment is stealthing around. Even in big cool set pieces, that's going to be the majority of it. As you can see, PC Gamer says, when you do get spotted while you're going through a level, it's rarely a mission ender. Guards seem happy to have a quick fist fight with you rather than running off to raise the alarm, using the simple but satisfying melee combat system. Despite their thunderous impact, your punches rarely attract wider attention, so once the guy in front of you is down, you're free to go back to the shadows. Gunfire is the only thing that'll really bring down the entire Reich upon you, and that's easily avoided. Your whip can snap weapons out of enemies' hands, at which point they forget they ever had one and their lust for fisticuffs takes over. Like, it's okay, but the rest of what they say is it's a slightly chaotic and precarious kind of stealth by design. I'm sure you can slink through Nazi bases like an unseen ghost if you really put in the effort, but it felt natural to swing between effective sneaking and moments of panicked brawling. It evokes Jones's scrappy underdog nature. He's not a ninja, he's an improviser. But equally, I don't think there's a ton of meat here for those who do love a tense stealth experience. To support that cinematic feel, guards have been made about as intelligent as the heavy objects you frequently hit them with. And while there are elements of immersive sim design, such as alternative routes to discover, they're all very light touch. That keeps things from getting too slow and cerebral, but when stealth is the core experience, I do worry that the systems here are a bit too shallow to stretch across a whole game. See what I mean between the difference of descriptive preview versus like an analytical and critical one? PC Gamer in this case is describing what the game is like and then also critiquing what it's like, whereas IGN was just describing systems and leaving all of the critical evaluation at the door, saving that for a review or whatever else when they inevitably give this a 7 out of 10, locking it in now, calling it. But they weren't the only ones. Maristation, which is a Spanish gaming website and journalist outlet. They also went to the preview and had some interesting things to say as well. Translated through ChatGPT, it says, quote, "The second more serious issue we've had with the game is the artificial intelligence, which needs significant improvement in both stealth and combat. It's noticeable that the enemy behavior requires refinement, as sometimes they act quite erratically." And again, I cannot stress enough just how important enemy AI and behaviors are in a game that's primarily stealth. Okay, like it's a big deal. Okay, it's a big deal. Dealing with really, really dumb enemy AI when that's what you're expected to do for 12 to 15 hours or however long this ends up being, that is a problem. And, you know, I think they could kind of get away with having stupider AI in the Wolfenstein games because you're just shooting through waves and waves of them, okay? Like if they're not behaving realistically behind cover and they're just standing and shooting at you instead of like ducking down more frequently, that's not a big deal because there's so many of them and so much is happening on screen, you can kind of just tune it out or you might not even notice it all. But with this, when you're going to be crawling and slinking through levels very carefully and intentionally, having a guard that's just, oh, that's very interesting. And that's you. Todd's you. You're so weird. You know, oh, Todd. Oh, no. Timmy's dead. Oh, he's on the floor. Anyway, like that doesn't work, okay? And this to me has been seen in all of the gameplay we've gotten. As you can see, even in this gameplay, there's moments where really, in my opinion, Indy should be alerting guards much quicker. They should be reacting much faster. They should be screaming or hollering to their other enemies in the map to alert them to whatever is happening here. And they just don't. And you know, in the last year or two, there's been a discussion in the industry of whether bars should be raised when a game comes along and like really does something quite impressively. And my stance is that we should raise the bar for games. I think if a title like Baldur's Gate 3 comes along and shows how amazing an RPG really can be with all sorts of levels of decision-making and consequence that just blows your mind, I think that's good to raise the bar. Force everybody to do better and better work. That's how the industry moves forward. In the case of this game, I'm constantly reminded whenever I see the footage, I'm reminded of like how The Last of Us Part 2's enemy AI worked, which whether you like Neil Druckmann or you like The Last of Us story or any of that, it's sort of beside the point. That game's AI was ridiculous. Every NPC in that game has a name. When you kill one of them, they start screaming, "Amanda, what happened?" Or the Seraphites, they have their own system of communication through whistling. So if you learn what the whistles mean, you can start to track how they're moving around the map based purely on how they're whistling to each other. Like, it's amazing and wildly impressive. And that was 4 years ago. 4 years ago. They've had time to implement ideas like that or cool concepts like that. And they're also charging full AAA price for this game. Technically more, it's $70, right? I know adjusted for inflation is basically the same, but you get what I mean? Like, this is priced at the same level as that game. Why would we lower the bar for AI in this game that features a lot of stealth compared to that game from 4 years ago? Perhaps they're just unrealistic expectations on my part, but when I see a stealth game and I see enemies behaving in a way that would have been stupid for the 360 era, I get frustrated and I get turned off. And even if it's a big recognizable IP, that just doesn't change for me. You know, it's something I can't unsee, much like the art style and presentation looking kind of like a VR game. I can't unsee it once I feel like the AI is not great, especially because other games from years and years ago did it so much better that it's not even close. So we'll keep an eye on it. You know, I hope that they continue to improve it as we get closer and closer to launch. In probably like a week or so, they're going to start to send out review codes and people will start to check out the game and critique it, which I look forward to. I don't expect to be reviewing this, but you better believe I'm going to be reading the reviews when they do come out because mark my words, I do think enemy AI is going to be a huge talking point in most of those reviews, even though those same people are not mentioning it now while they're hyping you up so that you go and pre-order the game or buy the early access upgrade for Xbox's Game Pass version. But you know what? If you want me to do this deep dive for other upcoming games through 2025, let me know in the comments and subscribe to this channel because we're rocking and rolling, getting bigger and bigger by the day. And if you want more candid and casual conversations about games, come over to my second channel, Luke Stevens Live. We hang out there all the time, stream many times a week, and there's tons of content over there that doesn't make it onto the main channel, so go check it out. It's a really good time. But anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you if you did contribute to the fundraiser. You are awesome, and I'll see you in the next video. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.